Welcome back to Pump Take Hockey. Today we're going to be doing a tier list of all the NHL teams and ranking them into 5 different categories based on their play so far this season. We're about at the halfway point of the season, so it seems like a good time to sort of analyze what teams are contenders, what teams are pretenders, what teams are lottery picks, and what team is Buffalo. You want to start off with our brand new beer of the week this week?
Absolutely. So I figured there's no better way to celebrate the gorgeous weather we've had over the weekend and into the end of last week than by making this week's beer of the week the beer of summer. Brava. Brava's one of those beers that kind of flies under the radar over the summer because it's not as highly touted as your stereotypical Rona and lime that you usually crack if you're sitting on the back porch. But having said that, Brava deserves some more credit. It's a nice little 5.5% beer, and it goes down so nicely. It's so refreshing. So there's been some gorgeous weather over the past couple of days, high of 17 where we are today. So no better way to celebrate than by tying into the beer of summer. So that's this week's beer of the week. Brava.
Yeah, I can't complain. It's been a nice little day for like spike ball and grilling in the backyard. Ooh. Brava goes perfectly with that. So
does it ever. Our unofficial sponsor for this week's episode.
Yeah. All right. So let's dive right into this. We're going to go alphabetical through the list of teams here. We'll start off with the Anaheim Ducks. I have all of mine written down, and if we have any differing opinions, we can change and give our reasoning as to why. But I had the Anaheim Ducks in the lottery.
Yep, so did I.
Yeah, the Anaheim Ducks are just they're the worst team in the West Division right now. And they should be sellers and looking to rebuild at the end of this season. There's not much to say about the Anaheim Ducks.
I would agree. They've got some promising young talent on their team with the additions of Trevor Zegras and Jamie Drysdale. Their future looks bright over there for sure, but this year is definitely not the year. Having said that, they're not the Buffalo Sabres, so no, I think that fits them perfectly into the lottery category.
Only one team gets to be in that category. Yeah, the Anaheim Ducks are in their post Getzlaf era, and they're kind of in a bit of a transitionary period, so they should be looking to sell at the deadline and potentially collect a few more assets going into the offseason in this year's draft. Moving on to the Arizona Coyotes, another West Division team. I also had the Arizona Coyotes in the lottery as well.
So did I. No disagreements yet.
The Coyotes were a team that I actually had predicting to make to finish 4th in the West, and I thought they might be able to squeeze into a playoff spot. I was hoping for a little bit bigger of a season from guys like Clayton Keller, but unfortunately, they just haven't really seemed to be able to figure it out yet. They're still a young team. They've got some good young talent. Darcy Kemper's a good goalie still. He looks like he could potentially backstop a playoff team one day, but that just doesn't seem to be this year so far. Yeah,
they've been bit by the injury bug a little bit, and I was hearing rumors the other day that they're actually looking to potentially sell guys like Connor Garland, who's been a breakout player for them this year. Not to the point where they're actively trying to trade him, but they'll listen to offers on him. And considering the fact that he's one of their best players, I feel like if they had any hope to make the playoffs, they wouldn't be entertaining those offers. So I think it's good to put them in the lottery category for this one as well.
Yep. All right. So they go on. Arizona goes into the lottery as well. Moving on now to the Boston Bruins. The Boston Bruins haven't been off to the strongest start ever. They're 4th in the East Division right now, but I'm still putting the Bruins in contenders because the Bruins are just the Bruins. They're a very well-built team. They're a very gritty team, and they have a lot of playoff experience. So when it really comes down to it, the Boston Bruins are always just going to be contenders when they have the core intact as the way it is.
So this would be our first disagreement because I've got them in the pretenders category. And the only reason I have them there is because I feel like they lost a good chunk of their identity this year. They are a good gritty team, and you're right. They're one of those teams that are always going to be in the conversation at the very least. But I think come playoff time, the loss of Zdeno Chara is going to hit them a little harder than they may have expected. I still think they're going to make the playoffs, but I don't see them being the dominant Boston Bruins from years previous that we've seen from them before. But having said that, we can put them in the contenders category. It was kind of a tough decision. It came down to contenders or pretenders. I just opted to put them in the pretenders category because I don't see them making noise like they normally would after losing Big Z.
And they also lost Torrey Krug, which is another big blow to their back end, which is why at the beginning of the season I predicted them to lose to the Leafs when they met in the playoffs. because I do think that the Bruins are weaker than they have been in the past. So you know what? On this one, I'll actually concede that, partly because I have a bit of a vendetta against the Bruins. And I know you do as well. But let's put them in pretenders.
Yeah.
Because really, do we really think that we're going to be seeing the Bruins hoisting the cup at the end of this season?
No,
I think likely not. So if that's our criteria for contenders, then in pretenders they go. This is a team that has their own category just for them, eh?
Yeah, just for them. It's the only thing Buffalo's winning this year.
Yeah,
they won the competition of having their own category on a pump take video using Tier Maker.
The Buffalo Sabres are just so putrid this season that like they can't. It's honestly like disrespectful to put them in a category with any other team in the league. Like you've got teams like Ottawa and Detroit who are also just god awful right now, but those teams are just still significantly further ahead of the Sabres in the standings, and they also just have a lot more of exciting pieces on their team that makes them a bit more of a fun team to watch. Whereas the Buffalo Sabres are just dead last in the league. And it's not looking like that's going to change anytime soon. So they get their own category. Buffalo Sabres, dead last, 31.
Could you imagine if I disagreed with you here and I was like, actually, I think they're more of like a pretender?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, the Sabres, everyone hates Buffalo, including the people in Buffalo. I just feel like it's got this sort of mantra nowadays where anyone who goes to Buffalo hates hockey and hates everything about life. So Buffalo's just been a dumpster fire this year. And the fact that they're talking about trading Jack Eichel, we already talked about how much of a mess they are. So yes, I absolutely support them having their own category because calling them a lottery team is disrespectful to the other lottery teams.
Yeah, check out our Buffalo Sabres trash vid from a couple weeks ago if you want to dive deeper into what we think about the Sabres. Moving on to the Calgary Flames. So the Calgary Flames are second last in the Canadian North Division right now. But they're significantly ahead of the Ottawa Senators, and if they could string together a decent little run, the Calgary Flames could become relevant again and back in the playoff conversation. So I'm putting them in pretenders.
Yeah, I have them in pretenders too.
Yeah, because they're not, despite the fact that they're 6th out of 7 in the North Division, they're just not quite as bad as Ottawa, and the Calgary Flames have the talent and the depth that they could turn it around and still squeeze into the playoffs.
Yeah, and to allude to that point as well, they're not as bad as they might seem right now on paper, but at the same time, I don't think we're going to be seeing the Calgary Flames in the top 3 in the North this year. I think Toronto, Edmonton, and Winnipeg have the top 3 locked down. And I think they could battle Montreal for that 4th spot. But yeah, that's perfect reasoning to have Calgary in the pretenders category.
Yeah, agreed. Because I can see them making the playoffs, but I can't see them going far in the playoffs, which is essentially the definition of pretenders.
There you go.
The Carolina Hurricanes. So this is an interesting one. I'm curious to see what you say about this, but I have them in contenders.
So do I.
This is my first contender pick because the Carolina Hurricanes have one of the deepest blue lines in the league. And with Jacob Slavin and Brett Pesce, and Dougie Hamilton, of course, he's one of the best in the league right now. And they've got a lot of good young players up front, like Svechnikov is really coming into his own, and Martin Nichas is like having a great little breakout season too. I think the Carolina Hurricanes could go on a little bit of a run, and I think there's a legitimate chance that they could go deep in the playoffs.
The Carolina Hurricanes, it's also important to note that over the next couple of days, they're slotted to get Peter Mrazek back, which is going to be a huge boost for them between the pipes because James Reimer's been doing a good job holding down the fort, and Alex Nedeljkovic has been he's been doing solid in his limited sample size of starts as well. But Mrazek, I mean, when he's hot, he can be one of the best goalies in the league. So when they get him back, I think it's going to be a huge boost for them, and I think they deserve to be in the contenders category for that.
Yep, agreed. The Chicago Blackhawks. The Chicago Blackhawks have had a very nice little surprising start to their season. They're currently tied with Columbus in the standings for 4th in the Central. However, I do not believe in the Chicago Blackhawks. I think that they're pretenders because they're just past their prime. Jonathan Toews is out for the season. This is just not the Chicago Blackhawks that we once knew to be consistent contenders and if not favorites to win the cup every single year in and out, despite the fact that Patrick Kane has had a fantastic season and they've had great rookie performances from like Lankinen and Piotr Suter. I just don't think that I think they're pretenders because they're having a good team. They're having a good year so far. But I think they're far from contenders in this league.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think heading into this season, a lot of people before the season may have even had the Blackhawks contending. Well, not contending, but they may have had the Blackhawks slated to be a lottery team. So I think the fact that they kind of exceeded expectations at the start of the season and went on that little tear is good enough to certify them as pretenders at the very least, but they have been on a slide lately. They're 3-6-1 in their last 10. So I don't see the Blackhawks, like you said, if they somehow squeeze out a playoff spot, they're not going to make it any further than the first or second round. So
agreed.
Easy to call pretenders.
The Colorado Avalanche. The Avalanche have been hot lately, but they didn't get off to the hottest start at the beginning of the season. So their position in the standings may be a little bit, well, I guess they're second now in the standings just behind Vegas, but I think Colorado is the best team in the West Division. And they're starting to play like it now. The Colorado Avalanche I have as contenders.
Okay.
And I think that's a pretty easy decision to make. Is there anything you want to have?
The performance they've gotten this year from Philip Grubauer has been insane. They've been able to adapt to some of the obstacles that have been thrown their way with Cale Makar going down with injury and Nathan McKinnon going down with injury. They've been able to adapt to that, and they've gotten some good depth scoring from some guys like Logan O'Connor that you may not have seen last year. Mm-hmm. But they've got some bottom six guys that are getting scoring from all around the lineup, and Samuel Girard is another great player for them. When Makar went down with injury, Girard stepped up and he sort of filled that role on the top pairing. And they've got Bowen Byram as well, a hell of a player, 4th overall pick a couple of years ago. I agree. I think they're contenders. Yeah,
the Avalanche are one of those teams that can afford to lose some guys to injury because they have just such a deep team at every single position, right? Like Samuel Girard is a great guy to mention too. I've heard rumblings of him being in the Norris Trophy conversation too. So and he's already stepped into the league and become a big leader for their team. Yeah, so easy contenders for the Colorado Avalanche. They were my pick to win the cup at the beginning of the season, and they remain in that realm of contention. The Columbus Blue Jackets. So I have the Columbus Blue Jackets as contenders, as pretenders, not contenders. Because the Blue Jackets they're currently sitting in a playoff spot, and they could maintain that, but realistically, the Blue Jackets are best case scenario going to win one miraculous series in the playoffs, and that's the best possible situation for them.
Yeah, you can give the Blue Jackets the benefit of the doubt because they're tied with the Blackhawks right now, and realistically, Patrick Laine's been on a horrible slump lately since he got to the Blue Jackets via trade. I don't know that the Jackets are really going to make any noise until they fire John Tortorella, because I feel like we discussed this whole concept with the whole Laine Dubois trade. He's kind of overstayed his welcome in Columbus. And I don't see them going any further, like you said, than maybe winning one playoff round if they were to make it. But I wouldn't call them a lottery team either, because if Patrick Laine heats up, who knows what could happen. But I think as of now, Pretenders is a good category to rank them in.
Yep. All right, the Dallas Stars. So this is an interesting one because the Dallas Stars have gotten off to a very unfortunate start to their season. This team was a Stanley Cup finalist last year. And now they're sitting second last in the Central Division, behind Nashville and just above the Detroit Red Wings. So this is a team that last year you could have put them very high. But now you kind of have to balance it out a little bit based on like what they're potentially capable of and how they've been playing recently. So I have the Dallas Stars in Pretenders.
So do I.
Because I think that they can turn it around still. But it's going to be a tough climb for the Dallas Stars to get back into legitimate playoff, if not Stanley Cup contention again this year from the depths that they've buried themselves to start the season. So I think the Stars are a pretender because that's about as high as you can put them with the current record that they have.
Yeah, and honestly, you can look at the Stars and where they're at in the Central Division right now and say, oh, they're second last. Fuck it, they're a lottery team. But you can't say that, like you said, without taking a look at how they did last year. I mean, they were in the Stanley Cup final last year. They've been super underwhelming this year compared to that little run they had in the bubble. But it wouldn't be fair to call them a lottery team despite where they are in the standings. I think Pretenders is a good spot for them because I'm not sure that they could go on a run. I think the talent's there, but as of now, they haven't done anything to impress and make them worthy to be in the Contenders category.
Yeah, you can't sleep on a team that is just fresh off of a Stanley Cup Finals run because that team just knows how to get there and they could pull it off again if the cards go their way. Mm-hmm. The Detroit Red Wings. This is a pretty easy one. There's no Detroit category, so we got to put them in lottery. Because the Detroit Red Wings are just, and have been for the past couple of years, in a very extreme rebuild right now. And if it weren't for the putrid play of the Buffalo Sabres, the Detroit Red Wings would probably be the worst team in hockey right now. Yeah. But they've got an exciting young team. They're developing their prospects, but they are still going to be in the lottery this year, just as they were last year.
Yeah, it's okay, Detroit. You're not Buffalo. That's all that matters.
Yeah, exactly. There's hope for you. There's hope.
Yeah.
The Edmonton Oilers. Sorry, were you going to say something else?
No, I was just going to add on to the Red Wings. I was going to say you've got talent and you're not in Buffalo, so it's okay.
Yeah. All right. The Edmonton Oilers. I have them in Contenders because the Oilers, on their good days, look like one of the best teams in hockey and one of the most and they have one of the most unstoppable offenses in the league, which is just undisputable because you've got guys like Conor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl who are just absolutely running away with the scoring race this year. It's almost comically ridiculous how many points Conor McDavid had. He has 60 points in 34 games right now.
Disgusting.
Unbelievable. Like this guy is just so good. Like he just the guy dominates the best hockey league in the world, and he makes the other players, like his opponents, look like children out there. Yeah. Like Conor McDavid is on pace to score somewhere in the neck of the woods of like 100 points this season, despite the fact that it's only a 56 game season. That would be ridiculous. A 100 point season is like elite for an 82 game season. But this guy he's got 60 in 34 games. He's almost a 2-point per game player. Yeah. We haven't seen numbers like this since like Mario Lemieux almost.
I think two other aspects about the Oilers that are worth mentioning when it comes to why they're contenders is, first off, Mike Smith hopping into the fucking fountain of youth for some reason. Yep. He's been having a great season this year. I know the Oilers haven't really gotten what they've wanted from Mikko Koskinen this year. Smith's really stepped up and he's channeled his 2011, 2010 era version of him. And also Tyson Berry. Tyson Berry has had a complete turnaround for the Oilers this year. He was in Toronto last year, kind of got misused by their old head coach at the start of that season. Finally started to find his footing a little bit, but now in Edmonton, he's in a position where he can be the number one offensive defenseman, the power play quarterback. And when you're on the point feeding Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on the power play, you're pretty much guaranteed to put up points, and he's been doing just that. So those guys are also deserving of some credit for how the Oilers have played this year, and I agree. I think they're contenders.
Definitely. The only thing that worries me about the Oilers is just their inconsistency.
Yeah.
They got to be hot at the right time in order to really be contenders and go deep in the playoffs, but I think they're due at some point to pull that off. The Florida Panthers. This is another very interesting one, and I think you could say easily off the bat this year that Joel Quenneville has to be considered the favorite for the Jack Adams Trophy, Coach of the Year this year. The Florida Panthers have been playing outstanding hockey. Both Jonathan Huberdeau and Alexander Barkov are legitimate superstars in this league that are probably the two most underrated superstars in the NHL right now.
Yep.
Aaron Ekblad is having a big breakout season, and he's been in talks for the Norris Trophy as well. He's always been a very solid defensive guy on the back end, but this year he's really broken out his offensive game as well. And it's really helped to improve the entire play of the Florida Panthers. And you're starting to see a little bit of vintage Bobrovsky as well too. So
yeah, he's finally living up to that $10 million contract a little bit. Mm-hmm. Another name on Florida worth mentioning, before I'd say last season, because he broke out into the league last season, but before last season, did you know who the fuck Carter Verhagey was?
Before last season?
Before last season. Had you ever heard that name before?
No.
Fun fact. The Leafs drafted him in the third round in 2013. They traded him along with four other kind of like C-level prospects for Michael Grabner. Then the Islanders traded him to Tampa, and then Tampa traded him to Florida. And now with the Florida Panthers this year, he's got 24 points in 31 games. So
wow. Good for Carter Verhagey.
Yeah, there you go.
So I'm putting Florida in contenders.
Yeah, I would put Florida in the contenders category.
Yeah,
for sure.
Probably the first time in their entire history that they've actually been considered contenders.
Yeah,
but good for them.
Not a team I'd want to face this year, that's for sure.
Yeah, the state of Florida has seen some good hockey this year, eh?
Exactly. State of Florida's seen a lot in general.
Yeah. All right. The big LA Kings.
Favorites.
Yeah, favorites. Hottest team in hockey. That should be its own category on
Wait till they call up Quentin Byfield. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The Kings should have their own category. You're right.
Yeah, could just call it hottest team in hockey. It could be above favorite.
Exactly.
I'm putting the Kings in pretenders because like they're on the brink of a playoff spot. I was actually like, to be honest, when I was like doing this, I was considering pretenders or lottery because I kind of suspect that the Kings are going to have a little bit of a fall off. And their team is not built for the playoffs. Their team's kind of built for the lottery right now because they're in a transitionary period. But they've gotten off to a great start. Anze Kopitar is playing some of the most elite hockey of his career, and they're currently in the race for a playoff spot in the West. So you got to put a team like that in pretenders because the reality is that they're just not going to go deep if they make it.
Yeah, and truth be told, when you've got Anze Kopitar having the season that he's having, what is he, 5th in league scoring, he said?
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah. So when you've got a guy who's 5th in league scoring, odds are you're not a lottery team.
Yeah.
So I think that's
and Drew Doughty's having a great season. We've talked about the Kings plenty throughout all of our videos, but yeah. The Minnesota Wild. So the Minnesota Wild were off to a very hot start as well. They're getting great contributions from rookies. Mikko Kakkonen.
Kaapo Kakkonen.
That's right. Kaapo Kakkonen. I always get confused because it's Kaapo Kakko and Kaapo Kakkonen.
Oh, I know those. I want the Rangers.
And Kirill Kaprizov.
Yeah. Kirill Kaprizov's been wicked this year as well.
Yeah, so that puts them 3rd in the West Division right now, which is interesting because I thought the top 3 teams in the West were pretty rock solid in Vegas, Colorado, and St. Louis. But Minnesota has surprised, and they're comfortably sitting in a playoff spot right now. But I'm still putting them in pretenders because the Minnesota Wild are and always will be the pretenders in my eyes. And, they're getting some nice contributions from players that are on hot streaks and young guys that are coming up and having a nice start to their careers, but they're lacking that real veteran firepower that's going to propel them deep in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So the reality is that Minnesota could finish 2nd or maybe even 1st in that West Division. I still think I would put them in pretenders.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And I think a lot of the reason too is when you mentioned the whole thing about veteran presence, they're kind of in a period right now where they're transitioning from the Zach Parise, Ryan Suter days to the Kirill Kaprizov, Jordan Greenway, Joel Eriksson, Kevin Fiala days. Yeah. So those guys are taking over and they've done a hell of a job. They're making Minnesota Wild hockey exciting for the first time in however long, but that core just doesn't have what it takes at this, but I don't think they've got the experience, and I don't think they've got what it takes just yet to go deep in the playoffs. So I think, like you said, pretenders is a good spot for them.
Yeah. The Montreal Canadiens. You want to start us off with your take on the Habs so far?
I think the Habs have been exceeding expectations compared to what we may have thought they were going to be this year. I think a lot of people had the Habs sort of on the brink of making the playoffs, which is where they are right now. I think that the moves that they've made this year have paid off. I think Jeff Petry's having a hell of a season. I think that Nick Suzuki's been a very solid rookie for them this year. I think the Josh Anderson signing's paying off, or the Josh Anderson trade rather. And the Tyler Toffoli signing, he's been a hell of a player for the Habs. So I think they've had a good season this year, but I would put them into the pretenders category personally. I think they're probably slated to finish no higher in the North Division than 4th place. I think ever since Chris Johnson dropped that tweet where he called them a juggernaut, they've kind of cooled off a little bit. They haven't really been the team that Chris Johnson may have thought they were back at the end of January. Having said that, I think they're still, I wouldn't call them a shoo-in, but I think they've still got a good chance to make the playoffs. So that's more than what I thought they were going to be this year, or maybe at the very least where I thought they were going to be. So I would put them in pretenders.
Yeah, I totally agree. Unless Carey Price like rediscovers some vintage Price goaltending play in the latter half of the season that propels them to a higher playoff position and a position of home ice potentially going into the playoffs. I think the Habs are pretenders. They're probably going to make the playoffs, in my opinion, but I don't think they're going to get out of the first round. So pretenders definitely for the Habs. The Nashville Predators. I know we've been repeating this for like 4 teams in a row now, but I'm putting them in pretenders again because Nashville, like I still really like Nashville's team, to be totally honest with you. And maybe I'm thinking back to like the 2017 Stanley Cup Finals run that they had when they were one of the best teams in the league and they had that deep defensive core. But Nashville's had a very rough start to their season. But I think that Nashville is a team that could potentially trend up rather than down in the latter half of the season. You're just seeing guys like Johansson and Duchesne get off to rough starts, and they're not the players that they had been in previous seasons. But if they can kind of like harness some of their talent and turn their seasons around, then you can expect the Nashville Predators to climb and potentially contend for a playoff spot.
Yeah, I agree with the pretenders ranking for them. I think the tough part about like the tiers that we've got here is if I could, I would put them in between pretenders and lottery because I don't think they're a lottery team. Yeah. And for that reason alone, I would put them in the pretenders category because they just, I can't see them. I'm not putting them in the same class as the Ducks, the Coyotes, and the Red Wings as of now, right? Like they haven't been a great team this year, and I can't see them even winning a playoff round at this point. I don't know if they'll make the playoffs, but if they do, it's still the Nashville Predators, and I can see them kind of winning a round maybe, but I wouldn't put them in the lottery category. So yeah, I agree. I think pretenders for them. For sure.
Yeah, the pretenders category is kind of a wide range category. Teams that we don't think are going to win the cup. Like I don't think that any of these teams that we have in this category here are going to be hoisting the Stanley Cup at the end of the year. But I also don't think that they're necessarily like high pick in the draft type of teams either. So a lot of that can be a team that like just misses the playoffs, but just isn't terrible. And a lot of that can just be a team that I think is still quite good, but also just doesn't have quite what it takes to like go all the way.
Yeah.
So that is a wide range of teams, but with only 5 tiers, it's hard to be able to cover everything, especially when it was very necessary that we had an entire tier just alone to Buffalo.
Yeah, exactly. So realistically, we've actually only got 4 tiers, unless you're the Buffalo.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree. If we could put the Predators in like a low class pretenders category versus a high class pretenders, I would probably put them there. But since those don't exist, they're pretenders for sure.
Agreed. The New Jersey Devils. So I'm putting them in the lottery category as well. New Jersey is definitely a young team that's kind of on its in a bit of a transitionary period as well. They're just can't seem to really harness anything in recent years, not since they had that MVP season from Taylor Hall. But they've got a nice young team, and there's still hope for them, but they got to kind of corral a few more high-end prospects going forward in order to be able to really break through and potentially start doing some damage in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Devils are in a little bit of, they're still kind of on the tail end of their rebuilding period. I think they're at a point now. They've got a talented young goalie in Mackenzie Blackwood, but he's on a bit of a slide right now. And I don't think their goaltending is good enough, and I don't think their young talent is experienced enough to help them make any noise in the playoffs if they were to somehow make it. I don't think they're slated to be a playoff team this year. They're the second worst team in the division, I think, after Buffalo, like you said. So yeah, I think lottery is a good position for them.
Yeah. Okay, the New York Islanders. So this is maybe one of my hotter takes. I'm interested to see what you have to say about this too, but I'm putting the New York Islanders in pretenders. And that's because the New York Islanders are off to a fantastic start to their season. They're tied with the Washington Capitals for first in the East Division right now. But there's my issue with the New York Islanders, and this was my issue with them last year, and I know this is 2 years in a row now that the Islanders have just surprised me. So maybe I'm just naive and not believing in a team that just is very well coached and is a very good defensively sound team that can win hockey games that way. But I just don't really like believe in the talent of the New York Islanders.
Yeah,
call me crazy, but
no, I wouldn't call you crazy for that. And here's the thing. I've got them in the contenders category personally.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason I do is because of exactly what you just said about how you think you might be naive and they really are just a really good, really well-coached team. And that's where I'm at. They fucking fooled me twice in the past 2 years. I thought I would have called the Pretenders each of the last couple of years they made the playoffs, and both times they proved me wrong. So I'm hopping on their bandwagon this year. As much as I can't stand the Islanders, their play style makes me want to rip my hair out. They're so boring to watch, and they don't really have any superstar power on their team. But Barry Trotz is a fucking wizard, man. And the way I see it, I personally see the Islanders as being a better team than any of the guys that we've got listed in the Pretenders category, except for maybe Boston. So that's my reasoning. I think we could get away with putting them in the Pretenders category, but they're contenders in my eyes. I see them fitting in with that class of contenders we've got there, as opposed to the teams we've got in the Pretenders category.
You convinced me. I agree, because you know what the thing is like, you know, Semyon Varlamov has been absolutely elite this season. And partly because the defense in front of him has just been so sound that he doesn't, like, he can just, it's very easy for a goalie, especially of his age, to just sort of like be able to play at the elite level that he's been playing, right? And you're right. Like, honestly, when you watch the Islanders play, they're just a very unflappable team. Like, they're always going to give you the same thing every night, and that's like a low-scoring game. They're going to grind you down and likely pull off the W so far this year. I mean, their record speaks for itself. I agree with you. I just have a hard time picturing the New York Islanders winning the Stanley Cup at the end of the year because their team just does, on paper and, you know, even on the ice, just does not impress me like one bit. But yet their play style just works for them, and the system that Barry Trotz has implemented just works so well. So I agree with you. They're better than every team that we have Pretenders, and they're in the same realm as the teams in Contenders. So I'll forfeit that one and put them in Contenders.
Yeah, and like, honestly, if I could, just like we said with the Predators, and how if we could, we would put them in the low-class Pretenders category instead of the high-class Pretenders. If there was the option, I would put the Islanders in the low-class Contenders, because if there was a category between Contenders and Pretenders, I'd put them there, because I think they're better than all the teams in the Pretenders category, but I don't see them winning the Cup this year, which is, I think, alludes to your point perfectly. I think we both agree on that. So, but either way, I think they're better suited for the Contenders category. It pains me to say it because I can't stand watching them, but they've fooled me and they've proven me wrong the past couple of years. So
yeah, the New York Rangers. This is another interesting one, because I was very high on the New York Rangers going into the season. They were kind of one of my dark horse teams to potentially like do some real damage, but they've been very disappointing. But I'm not forfeiting my hope in the New York Rangers just yet. Based on their position in the standings, you could make an argument that they're a lottery team, but I'm going to put them in Pretenders because I think that they have the talent and the depth and the especially now that they've got Artemi Panarin back from that like fucked thing that happened to him where like Putin was like had like a bounty on his head or something. Now that Panarin's back in the dressing room, I think the New York Rangers are Pretenders because I think they can make a push for the playoffs the latter half of this season.
You convinced me on this one. I originally had them in the lottery category, but the way I see it now that I've thought about it a little bit more, the New York Rangers just need Alexis Lafreniere, Capo Caco, Mika Zibanejad to just fucking explode.
Yeah.
And at that point, I think you're seeing a much better version of the team than you normally would. I mean, Caco and Lafreniere are both off to a bit of a slow start this year, but I'm not sure now that I think about it if I'm ready to put them in the lottery category. I'm not sure if they're going to be a team that'll finish in the bottom five. So,
well, and take in like, do you remember that game a couple days ago where Mika Zibanejad scored 6 points in one period?
Yeah,
that was one of the most ridiculous. Like that was tied the record for most points in a period by an individual, and it was like the previous record holder that he's now tied with was like from the 1960s or something like that.
The
crazy.
funniest part about that game was that none of their coaches were available. I think they had like they had a couple of their minor league coaches and like the assistant GM or something up behind the bench, and they won 9-0. Like, just wild.
Yeah. All right. I like the Rangers and Pretenders because if I'm being honest, I heavily consider putting them in the lottery as well. But I think they just have a real shot at potentially turning their season around. Ottawa Senators. This is a pretty easy one. Lottery team easily. The Senators, I will say about the Senators, they look a lot better and a lot more exciting than they did last year, just in terms of the atmosphere that you kind of get from the players in the dressing room, and the youth movement that's going on there. Tim Stützle looks like he's going to be an awesome player. Brady Tkachuk and Tim Stützle have like this great little bromance going on that like kind of brings energy to the boys. But you know what? The Ottawa Senators are still one of the biggest lottery teams in the league. So,
as someone that's watched the Ottawa Senators play enough times this year, considering they're in the North Division, their issue right now is simply that they don't have the talent, which obviously seems like a Captain Obvious statement considering they're the Ottawa Senators. But they've got the young talent. They've got Stützle. They've got Brady Tkachuk. They've got Josh Norris, Drake Patterson. Like, they've got all these young, promising players. Eric Brandstrom's another one. They have the talent. They just don't have the experience, and they don't have the veteran presence around them to have them make any sort of noise. But they are going to be a very good team in a couple of years. So lottery for now, but I think we're going to see a better version of the Senators. And again, like another thing I was going to say, they will grind the fuck out of you every single night. Like, they're a relentless team. It's not like, I mean, it wouldn't be fair to compare anyone to the Buffalo Sabres this year, but I'll use them for the purpose of the argument. The Sabres are the type of team this year where they'll just like fizzle out and die the minute they face any sort of adversity. The Senators, they're not in it to make the playoffs this year, but they're in it to crush other teams' dreams. So they've been a pretty relentless team. I think they'll be good in a couple of years, but yeah, lottery for them this year for sure.
All right. The Philadelphia Flyers. I have the Flyers in Pretenders because they still, Carter Hart has been off to a very unfortunate, putrid start to his season. But the guy is still one of the best young goalies in the league, and the talent that he has speaks for itself when you watch him play. Whether he's letting in 4 or 5 goals a night, he's still got the poise of a goaltender that can always win a game and steal a game here and there for your team. If they start getting some better production from guys like Claude Giroux and Jakub Voracek, I think the Flyers are always sort of in that realm of the playoff hunt. So Pretenders for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're I wouldn't call them contenders this year. I think if Carter Hart was having the season that I think most people expected him to have this year, I might consider putting him in the contenders category, but their goaltending hasn't been good enough for them this year. And you're right, they need better performances from guys like Giroux and Voracek. Mm-hmm. So Pretenders is a good spot for them. I would agree.
All right, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the other side of Pennsylvania here. The Pittsburgh Penguins I have in contenders, and that might be considered a hot take, but the Pittsburgh Penguins, here's how I view the Pittsburgh Penguins. They're third in the East. They're going to make the playoffs, and they still have guys like Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, and they're a team that just top to bottom knows how to win and has won so many times before that you can just never count them out, even though they're not having a mind-blowing season so far this year. If the Pittsburgh Penguins make the playoffs, there's always that chance that they can go far. So I'm putting them in contenders.
That's a fair argument to make. It was kind of an up in the air decision for me. I personally went with Pretenders for them just because with every year that passes by for Pittsburgh and every year Crosby and Malkin and Letang get a year older, they become less and less of a threat in my eyes in the playoffs. And I think a couple of years ago, you easily could have made the argument, okay, yeah, Pittsburgh's a contender. Obviously, they're one of the best teams in the East. But this year, I don't know. I don't see them making it past maybe the second round if they were to make the playoffs. I think in the East Division at this point belongs to the Caps and the Islanders. And I wouldn't be against putting them in the contenders, but they just don't really they don't really do anything for me when we actually get down to crunch time. I'm not sure. I think with each year that goes by, like I said, and each year their core ages, they pose themselves as less and less of a threat in my eyes. So I would personally have them as pretenders, but I wouldn't be against putting them in contenders, because you're right. When the Pittsburgh Penguins make the playoffs, there's always the chance that they'll do damage.
I'm going to concede this one, actually, because you convinced me. And you know what? The Pittsburgh Penguins, this is mostly about how a team has played and looked so far this season. And the Pittsburgh Penguins, yes, they always have that possibility of winning the cup. But you're right. This is a much weaker iteration of the Crosby, Malkin, Pittsburgh Penguins team. And it's hard to imagine that team is going to be a legitimate contender for the Stanley Cup going into the playoffs, especially when I look at the other teams we have up here in contenders. I feel like those teams have earned that position a lot more than the Penguins have so far this year. So I agree with you.
It's hard not to put them in the contenders category, because when you think of the Pittsburgh Penguins, you think of Sidney Crosby, and you think of a team that's dominant in the playoffs year in and year out. But you're like, based on the way they've played this year, I'm not sure I'd put them in the contenders category.
It's the same reason why we put the Boston Bruins in pretenders too.
Like, they're still good. They're still good. We know what they're like as a team, and we know what they're capable of come crunch time, but they haven't earned it this year. Plain and simple.
All right. The San Jose Sharks, easy lottery team in my eyes. The San Jose Sharks just look absolutely shit this year so far. And stuff, it's kind of falling apart a little bit there too. Like, you see guys like Erik Carlson asking for a trade, which I found actually quite funny, because he said, I didn't want to get traded to San Jose just to go through a rebuild. And it's like, well, maybe you should have played better, because you're a huge reason as to why they have to go through a rebuild right now, because Erik Carlson is playing the worst hockey of his career right now. And he's on his high horse, acting as though like he's too good to be playing for the Sharks. But
it's like, buddy, maybe if you been playing a little better, maybe we wouldn't be discussing the Sharks are a lottery team. And another thing about the Sharks is that they're tied into a lot of fucking terrible contracts. I think I read that I remember I read a piece the other day on the Sharks saying that Marc-Edouard Vlasic is being used in a sheltered third pairing role. Marc-Edouard Vlasic has, I think, 5 years left on an $8 million a year contract. You don't want to be playing a guy who's making $8 million a year on the bottom pairing to shelter him. No. That's a sign that you fucked up. So hefty contracts. They're getting some good production from guys up front, like Logan Couture's having a career year, I'm pretty sure. Evander Kane's been having a great season, but that's about all you can say about the Sharks at this point.
Agreed. St. Louis Blues. I have the St. Louis Blues in contenders because they look just as solid as the St. Louis Blues that we saw a couple of years ago that was winning the Cup. They're fourth in the West right now, but they're tied with Minnesota and just a few points behind Colorado and Vegas, with a big 5-point lead on the LA Kings in fifth right now. The Blues are going to easily make the Cup. Make the playoffs, and they still just have one of the deepest, very well coached teams in the league, and I think they've earned a spot in contenders, especially from what I've seen of them this year playing in the West. I like the Blues a lot.
I would agree with you. I've got them as contenders as well, and I think the fact that they just got Vladimir Tarasenko back as well isn't going to do anything but help them from here on out. So I think if we were to call them contenders before they got Tarasenko, they're definitely contenders now that they have him back.
Yeah, and if Jordan Binnington he hasn't been elite so far this year, but if he can kind of refine his form from last season and the season before, then the St. Louis Blues will be a force to be reckoned with going into the playoffs. So contenders, definitely. The Tampa Bay Lightning. Do you want to start this one off?
Yep. The Tampa Bay Lightning. I'll be the one to claim who I think the favorite will be this year, and that's Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay Lightning are my favorites this year. And you know what? We saw how dominant they were in the bubble last year. We saw they fucking went all out at the trade deadline, and they pretty much traded for their entire third line with the Barclay Goodrow, guys like Barclay Goodrow and Blake Coleman. And they have been a hell of a team. We saw them make the Stanley Cup Finals back in 2015 against the Chicago Blackhawks, and that was when their core was young. And now we've kind of seen that core grow and become kind of those grizzled vets. Victor Hedman's having an incredible season. Braden Point's having a great season. Steven Stamkos is having a great season. They're the best team in the NHL by far at this point. They've got 48 points. They're 23-6-2. And the scary part is, and the reason why I've got them as favorites is because they don't have Nikita Kucherov right now. So consider what the Lightning have been able to do this year without Nikita Kucherov, and then throw him into the mix, and you've got the definite contenders this year. I don't see anyone.
Kucherov is supposed to be back for the playoffs. Am I correct in thinking that? Yeah.
Started skating.
And you look at, like, you just look down their roster, and it's just so deep. Like, you've got Andre Palat, who's having a career year.
Yep.
Braden Point has proven time and again that he is a superstar in this league. One of the most underrated in the league as well. Mikhail Sergachev has turned into an elite offensive defenseman.
Yep.
And now they've got a healthy Steven Stamkos. Like, this team could be better than the iteration last year that won the cup. And
then to cap it all off, they've also got a contender for the Vezina.
Well, of course. I mean, Vasilevsky goes without saying, but like Vasi, like the guy's record is 23-1. He's got a 186 goals against average and a 933 save percentage. Vasilevsky is one of those guys that is just always in talks for the Vezina, and Victor Hedman is one of those guys that's always in talks for the Norris. Like, I genuinely believe that Vasilevsky is the best goalie in the league and Hedman is the best defenseman in the league.
Yep.
And you put those two together, plus all the depth they have around those guys and the high flying offense that they have. The Tampa Bay Lightning are just the best team in hockey and have been for quite a few years. I think they just had some bad luck in the playoffs.
I agree.
The Toronto Maple Leafs, contenders.
I agree.
They are on quite the slump of late.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about that a little bit? This is your team.
Yeah, I think the Leafs officially found what their biggest flaw is down the stretch right now, and it's goaltending. And I hate to say that. I hate ripping on Freddy Anderson, and I hate ripping on guys who struggle, because I can't imagine it's easy, especially when it's my favorite team and you're playing in a fucking hockey mecca like Toronto. You know that the spotlight's always on you. But it was kind of speculated a little bit before, and now it's been confirmed that Freddy Anderson is playing through some sort of injury. So I think with Jack Campbell coming back, and hopefully he can stay healthy, because he came back on Saturday night and he got his second straight shutout. I mean, his last shutout was back in January, but either way, Campbell's shown he can be an effective goalie in a small sample size. And I think now they need to hope that Campbell stays at that, even close to that level. I think they're hoping that Jack Campbell will be that, at the very least, won't be the second best goalie in every game that they play. And I think they got to get Freddy Anderson back to the form that they know that he's capable of. He said in a quote to the media the other day, he said, "You don't just lose your skill set," which is such a true fact. Like, Freddy Anderson didn't just become shit overnight. Like, he's obviously battling something. I think they got to give him a proper amount of time to rest up and get back to 100% healthiness. And if the Leafs have decent goaltending down the stretch, they've had the best defensive core this year that I've ever seen them have. I think the additions of TJ Brody and Zach Bogosian have really helped out the defensive core. I see them as contenders. I wouldn't call them a favorite, but I think I think for the first time in my time watching the Leafs, I think this team is built to go past the first round. So
yeah, you know that I have and always will be a believer in the Great Dane.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's just even back when he was playing in Anaheim, he looked like a great, solid young goalie that had all the fundamentals of his game down, and his skill set was just elite. And he just had to put it together and maintain his sort of confidence and mental stability in net as well. I think, whatever he's battling right now, I think when he can push through that and get to be completely healthy, then the Leafs are going to be a dangerous team going into the playoffs this year. Because if they can have solid goaltending on top of the way that the rest of their team has played so far this year, anything's possible. So
yeah, and I think the addition of couple guys too, like Joe Thornton, Jason Spezza, and Wayne Simmons, I think having those guys in the dressing room down the stretch is going to help as well, especially for a team that's got a young core like the Leafs, who don't really have a lot of playoff experience to go along with their regular season experience.
Yep. All right, the Vancouver Canucks. This is another one that is potentially debatable, but I have them in pretenders. And that's because I just don't think that the Vancouver Canucks, especially with I'm considering the talent that they have on their team, and yes, they're underachieving right now, but the talent they have on their team with Elias Peterson and Bo Horvat and Brock Besser and JT Miller. I also still believe in Braden Holtby as a goalie too. And young guys like Quinn Hughes, their roster has the potential to really do some damage, like we saw them do last year. So yes, the Vancouver Canucks are off to a bit of a slow start this year, but they've turned it around a little bit lately, and I think that the Vancouver Canucks are not a lottery team.
No.
When I'm looking at that group of lottery teams down there, I think they belong in pretenders.
And I think the thing with the Canucks is, especially for me, when I was debating where to put them in the tier, I originally had them as a lottery team. That was my knee-jerk reaction because you look back at the way they played throughout January and February, there was nothing going right for that team. But I think the one of the main aspects that's kind of inspired my change of heart here when it comes to where to rank the Canucks has been the emergence of Thatcher Demko between the pipes. Because over his past 7 or 8 starts, he's posted absolutely ridiculous. I'm talking Vezina-like numbers. Mm-hmm. And I think the way that, Thatcher Demko was one of the most highly touted goalies from the draft that he was in. I think it was the 2014 draft, if I'm not mistaken. And the Canucks picked him up, and he's proving why he was one of the higher ranked goalies from that draft class. And I think if he keeps playing like this, I think that's going to be enough to inspire the rest of the team to kind of figure their shit out and at least get them to a point where they can be considered pretenders. I'm not sure. At the start of the season, maybe a month ago, I would have thrown them in the lottery category, but I think they've done enough over the past month to kind of ease them into the pretenders area.
I agree. So let's put them in pretenders for now anyway. The Vegas Golden Knights, that one's easy. They're top of the West. I've watched them play many times this year so far, and the Vegas Golden Knights are an elite team. Potentially one of the most elite of this contenders category that I'm about to put them in. Vegas could go all the way. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them do so.
If I wasn't going to pick the Lightning as the favorites this year, it would have been Vegas for sure.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest parts, the play of Marc-Andre Fleury has just been fantastic. And if I'm being honest, I like Marc-Andre Fleury a lot. I hope he wins the Vezina this year because he's one of the GOATs of goalies in the NHL. He's 5th all time in wins, and he'll probably move up to 4th or 3rd by the end of his career. He's still playing some of the best hockey of his career right now, and he's 37 years old. Former 1st overall pick. He's won 3 Stanley Cups with the Penguins. Mm-hmm. Mind you, he wasn't starting for 2 of them, but anyway. But Marc-Andre Fleury has propelled the Vegas Golden Knights to the top of the Western Division this year, and Vegas is looking like they're a very, very strong contender to win the Stanley Cup at the end of the year.
We're also seeing an incredible season from Mark Stone, from Max Pacioretty. Shea Theodore's taken a big step forward this year. He's got 23 points in 26 games, and they just don't lack depth anywhere. They've got scoring and they've got ability all around the lineup. So I think, like I said, if Tampa Bay weren't the favorites, it would be Vegas. Yeah,
Mark Stone is looking like this is the most elite Mark Stone has ever played in his entire career. And he genuinely looks like he's really come into his own as a top tier superstar in this league. Back when he was on Ottawa, he was a good player. He showed signs of being a solid top line winger, but you don't really know at that point of a guy's career, how consistent he's going to be and where he's going to turn out later on. But Mark Stone and Pacioretty and Alex Pietrangelo too, you have to mention as well.
Yes.
Great addition on the back end for them. So Washington Capitals. Sorry.
I was just going to say NHL 13 had Mark Stone's potential at 2.5 green stars. So suck on that, NHL 13.
Yeah. Figured out EA Sports.
Literally.
They got to get some better prospects up in the press boxes, eh?
Exactly. It's too bad Mark Stone's over 26 now. They're going to have to trade him,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
all right. The Washington Capitals, contenders, easy contenders. in my opinion.
I don't really have much else to say. They're top of the East Division right now. I really don't have anything else to say. I think I think the fact that Ilya Samsonov went down with injury at the start of the year, Vitek Vanacek came up and killed it.
Yeah.
I think he deserves a lot of the credit for how Washington's played this year, just because he wasn't supposed to be the guy in Washington, but he's kind of been forced to this year, and he's thrived in that role.
Another guy to mention.
Go for it.
Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say another guy to mention too that is kind of like finding some of his old form again is Nicklas Backstrom.
Yes.
Like Nicklas Backstrom has always been throughout his career one of the more consistent players in the league, but in the past couple of years he saw a bit of a drop off in production. But now he's got 34 points in 31 games again, and he's looking like the elite playmaker that he's always been. So, let's finish it off with the Winnipeg Jets, the last team of our tier list. I'll just go right out and say that I have Winnipeg in contenders as well.
So do I.
Because, Winnipeg, and I was debating it a little bit too, because, Winnipeg has shown some struggles in consistency over the past few years, but this year, Winnipeg just looks like they've really figured it out. They've got the center depth now that they traded Laine for Dubois. They're getting a huge breakout seasons from, well, I wouldn't call it a breakout season for Kyle Connor because he has proven that he's an elite goal-scoring winger, but Nikolai Ehlers is having a fantastic breakout season for the Jets. You've got one of the best goalies in the league in Connor Hellebuck. And their defensive core has looked better than you may have expected going into the season. I thought that the Winnipeg Jets were going to be hindered by their defense, but that they've kind of proven me wrong on that front. What do you have to say about the Jets?
No, nothing really that you haven't said already. I mean, the Winnipeg Jets, I think I might consider putting them into pretenders if they weren't playing in the North Division. But the way I see it right now, and you know what, that's not to say that the North Division is any weaker than the other divisions, but I think just the way that their lineup stacks up against high octane offensive teams like Toronto and Edmonton, I think the fact that they're getting a career season out of Mark Scheifele right now, and then they've got Pierre-Luc Dubois up the middle with him. Nikolai Ehlers is having a hell of a season. Kyle Connor's having a hell of a season, like he said.
A guy to point out too is Neil Pionk.
Yeah, I think he's been a big part of the Winnipeg Jets. I won't say reformed defensive core, but like they're better than expected defensive core this year. And obviously, while Connor Hellebuck isn't really putting up numbers like he has in previous years, we've seen Vezina-like performances from Connor Hellebuck, and we know that he can drop one at any point. Yeah. So I think they're definitely deserving of being in the contenders category.
All right. So that wraps up our tier list. Look how beautiful that is.
There it is.
Now we can go back and review. Is there anything that we think we should change at this point now that we have looked at the teams that we've grouped them together? I think we did a pretty good job.
I think we did too. Hey, if you tilt your head and look at it sideways, it kind of looks like a hand flipping you off.
Yeah. All right. So before we wrap it up, let's talk about our beer of the week. Brava, the beer of summer.
How would you rate Brava?
Well, okay. So I want to preface by saying that last week, the JR rating of 10 out of 10 is a very biased one, and that's only because it's kind of a joke that JR is the best beer of all time. But I think from now on, I'm going to be rating beers based on like the genuine, the genuine taste and everything about them as well. So
honest rating.
Brava, I'm going to rate a 6 because I think Brava is one of the better, refreshing tasting light lager beers. So I'll give it a 6 out of 10. But from now on, like those high rankings are going to be reserved for the craft beers that we're going to be pulling out in future weeks here.
Yeah, I would give Brava a 7, but that's only because I know that you're more of a, you've got more of an expanded palate when it comes to beers. You like your ales and your, I don't know about yourself. I know you like your ales and your pilsners as much as you like your lagers. Most of my favorite beers are lagers. So just because of that, I'm going to give Brava a 7. But 6 and 7. That's kind of the same ballpark. I think it's a good summer beer. It's not anything crazy, but it's not something I've ever been disappointed with. So I think 7's an appropriate rating for me.
Yep, I agree. All right, so let's wrap it up here. I might go enjoy one more Bravo before I hit the hay tonight. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and let us know in the comments what you think about our tier list, whether teams should be moved around. Who's your favorite? Who's your Buffalo? Let us know in the comments, and thanks for watching.
Cheers.